Guru Nation, welcome back to the Clinical Trials Guru. I'm here at DIA 2019 in San Diego with Michael Casey. Michael Casey, how is it going?
Oh, very well. How are you doing?
Good. So tell us a little bit about your company. Then we're going to get back to your career and then bring it back to what you're doing now,
Sure,
if that makes
absolutely.
sense. So what is HyperCore? What do you guys do?
HyperCore is a group of 8 networks that have actually kind of formed together to actually form an alliance that forms over 80 sites across 4 or 5 different countries, just to kind of bring efficiencies in the clinical research and kind of a one-stop shop approach where we can use a collected amount of data and a collected amount of intelligence to kind of make ourselves a good partner for CROs and sponsors alike.
Do you think that is where the industry is headed in streamlining and speed, efficiency? And if so, why aren't more organizations doing this, or are they?
Yeah, I think consolidation is going to happen by nature. I think
at the site level.
even at the site level, because I think sites are kind of competing for the same apples a lot of times. This way you can actually get a bunch of sites together and you can get all the apples versus kind of like picking and choosing between the two. And I think it makes it kind of makes a better approach from a perspective of a site and a CRO or a sponsor, where you can actually come to one place and get 50, 40, 30 sites all in one spot instead of going to 30 different sites.
So I imagine one of the objections is going to be, well, from the sponsor, we don't want to work with SMOs, right? I'm sure you get that a lot. Or you guys are new, so maybe you'll start getting that.
Notice you don't see that in our name. We're not a site management organization for sure. We're definitely an alliance and a partnership across several sites. So it's much bigger than a traditional SMO in a sense.
And we were talking earlier about virtual trials, okay? Where do you see, is that hype? Is it real? Where do you see that playing into the next decade?
I think it's definitely a thing that could happen in the next decade for certain. I think with data innovations that are actually coming out nowadays, it's getting closer to possibility, but I think we're still a little bit further away than we'd probably like to be, especially in the more pivotal phases of phase 2 and phase 3, where it would probably be most important and physically efficient to do a trial like that. But I definitely think we'll see it before too long.
So we have a lot of sites watching, a lot of new sites, a lot of small sites. Are you guys accepting applications for people to join your network?
Yeah, absolutely. We're always looking to expand, but there is a quality achievement that needs to be attained. So we're all about data quality and site quality. So we need a lot of things around efficiencies internal to the site and infrastructure at the site to really start to be considered.
And how can a small or new site compete in a market where, as you said, there's going to be a lot of consolidation? And virtual trials as another threat to the sites.
Right.
If you're a small site now, should they be panicked, or what should they do?
No, I don't think there's going to be any quick replacement for old-time research, Even in the digital age, there's still going to be people that need to kind of actually do the hard science. I don't think it'll ever be replaced, maybe augmented in a sense. And I think a site that's kind of starting out and maybe fearing about it, you're really as good as your performance on trials. And if you do good work, you'll be rewarded for it in the long term.
And at the end of the day, it's really the PI who's the one that the sponsors look at. Even if you're part of an alliance or you're just by yourself, it's the PI that the sponsor. And now we're going to get into your career because you are an expert in this stuff. So why don't you break it down? How did you get started in clinical research?
I actually left a clinical research company that was doing dioxin testing to go to, at the time, Quintiles. And I started in data management. Worked there in an innovative, the innovation back when I started was you could fax in your CRFs and it would go to a computer and you would just look at the computer printout of the fax, and then we would enter that into the database.
High tech.
Yeah, high tech.
That's better than FedExing.
Yeah, it was insane. We were so cutting edge. And then we started moving into, did pharmacovigilance, and then I started moving in, Quintiles had started a partner site management program as well as...
So what happened with that? Were you involved in that?
Yeah. We were trying to centralize a lot of things and make it more efficient around feasibility, site identification, and actually have relationships with sites to bolster that up. And
So
I was
basically, and when was this? Like
2004.
2004. So it was as early as 2004 when they
Mhm.
were doing that. Do you think their idea was similar to what Hypercore is doing now?
Yeah, I think it's of the same. It's cut from the same cloth in the sense that I think there's that consolidation and that alliance-ship kind of builds trust. And when you become a trusted partner or a trusted advisor, you can kind of cut through a lot of the red tape that holds people back and like adds timing into studies where you can have master contracts, you can have a one contract deal, you can visit sites so frequently that you can waive visits. So there's a lot of efficiencies that come with that kind of like teamwork and alliance.
So after, well, I guess that's 2004. So what happened after that project?
I went and I moved on to actually doing partnership metrics, so globally. So we had expanded the partner program, and I think it went from the first 5 people I was with to about over 300 globally. So I was going into the data and using the data to kind of track how our partner sites were doing across the globe.
So one of the first use cases of big data, tracking site metrics, which now is just done all the time by everybody, right?
Yeah.
So you guys pioneered that.
Yeah, we would have to pull reports from our system, like several different reports, because it was so scattered and it wasn't set up for that kind of efficiency. So we'd have to pull like a startup report and a monitoring report, and then a enrollment report, which were all over this one system differently, and then we'd have to like put them in spreadsheets because they're amazing, and do calculations and then kind of make scorecards for our partners. So we had to do all the hard math.
And how many sites, how many partners approximately did Quintiles have?
Oh, I think somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30 to 50.
Wow.
Probably it was fluctuate because they had to actually keep a good score to maintain partnership.
Interesting.
So so that was it. You're only as good as your last study. So if you started kind of slacking.
Now, what were the top 5? I'm sure you don't remember the order, but maybe you do. Top 5 metrics that you guys looked at back then for sites.
Enrollment over time. So that's important, not just enrollment. Enrollment's a weird number. If you don't do it over time, then you don't really understand.
Over time.
Yeah.
Well, so what does that mean?
So like patients per site per month, if like back before we started doing this, it would be like, oh, this site got 12 patients. Well, if they got 12 patients in 12 months, they were getting 1 patient per month. But if a site got 3 patients in 1 month, that's actually threefold what it would look like. But if you were just looking at the enrollment as 3 and 12, depending on when the site came on, it might look like the site that got 3 was worse off than the one that got 12. But in actuality, the site that got 3 maybe came on later, did a lot of work really fast, and was actually super efficient. So we had to start looking at things in kind of different scales so that we understood how that looked in the long term versus in like short term eyeballing of
Enrollment over time. Okay, what were like 2 other important ones? The most important.
Startup time, efficiencies and contract negotiation and budget.
What's a good startup time for a site?
15 to 30 days.
Okay.
If you can do it that fast, but there's a lot of back and forth and there's a lot of negotiation, but
including budget, so regulatory and budget.
Yeah, if you can get it all done in about 30 days, because the pressure's on the sponsors and the CROs to get sites up because the protocols come out so kind of last minute. They want to get everything done as fast as you can. So if you want to make yourself look good, always negotiate those things as fast as you can.
All right, and then number 3?
Let's see, we did patients per site per month. We did startup. I would say having all the necessaries of the site, the refrigerators, the coordinators, that infrastructure. Because if you can come in with that infrastructure, even if it's just one coordinator and maybe a site manager and a PI, I think that kind of teamwork, that levelized teamwork on the site level becomes hugely important. That's why at HyperCore, everybody has their very good infrastructure set up. So a lot of these sites were actually partner sites when I worked with them back in the day. So that infrastructure is wildly important, but everything will fall in line after that infrastructure comes out.
And I can see how your background fits in nicely with the initiatives you guys are doing
Yeah,
here.
absolutely.
So what happened after the partner sites?
I actually ran I3 at the time. I was their global feasibility site ID lead for a couple years, and then when they merged, things kind of got scattered, and I was asked to go back to Quintiles to do drug development and design. So the last 8 years of my career I spent doing strategic drug development with pharmaceutical companies.
Like protocol design or?
Clinical development plan design, so multiple protocols and how they all fit together, and more taking people into a bigger picture versus a short-term picture.
Right.
So you had to have really kind of an interesting thing, and we were doing it to data-driven. So everything was data-driven. You had to have reasons for making your decisions, and if you didn't, then we were going to question you. So it was an internal consulting kind of role.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And then now is
now we're in Hypercore, yeah.
Okay.
So I get to bring it all together. I went
That was
from
the
data
career
management
trajectory,
to now.
But it's good. All of it fits together. Like you're able to see the bird's eye view. You're a generalist. You know, everybody starts out in this industry as a specialist, but you really want to be a generalist.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to hire a generalist right away.
No.
Okay.
Well, you have to have the framework in place, right? So getting the framework in place will make everything go cohesively better. If you have a lot of specialists, they're really arguing about what their specialty is and what works for them instead of seeing what works for the greater good. And I've seen that in pharma and CROs over my career. So you kind of have to figure out all those pieces where it all works together well. And I think, we do that here.
Yeah. And two things before we wrap up. Thank you, by the way, for the long form interview. One advice for the sites, since you were a feasibility specialist. All right. Every site thinks that they have to embellish their numbers.
I was getting ready to say that.
Yeah. So give us your thoughts on this.
Don't embellish your numbers. No. Because if you'll think you're doing it to get the study, and then you'll underperform, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you underperform, then you're only as good as your last study. They won't use you again. So being honest, I think from even leading entire global teams of feasibility specialists, I would take the honesty over the inflation, and the inflation, we can see it coming from a mile away. So, because there's going to be data inconsistency. There's like everybody says they can get 4, and then somebody says they can get 16. You're going to be like, and you think you're going to get the study on that, and you're probably not.
So when you were analyzing these feasibilities, did you see the numbers? Like, is it like just the standard bell curve, like, enrollment projections, most fall in the middle, and then there's like outliers?
You could kind of tell when people were winging it, I think, and we also, obviously, a lot of the CROs and pharma are sitting on their own data, so they can kind of validate what they expect. So it's kind of a weird, it's like dating, right? So they're kind of, you're trying to court them in a sense, so they can kind of tell you when, like, I don't think that's real. I don't really think you're presenting yourself like you think you're presenting yourself, because this is what our history looks like, and you're telling us something completely wildly different. So it kind of sticks out as a data anomaly.
Good advice for the sites. I don't know if they'll listen to you, but good advice. One more for the people trying to break into the industry. Right, the household name in research tends to be CRA, because they're, that's in the news. Usually Forbes or Money, one of those websites always lists CRA as top 10 professions in any industry.
Absolutely.
Right. So a lot of people are attracted to that, but it's very tough to break in.
Yeah.
What do you suggest they do?
I suggest taking another specialized role if you can't break in the CRA right away. I think, like, especially in the regulatory field, is really important, because it's probably one of the chokeholds that a lot of people don't give a lot of concern and time to. I mean, they do, but because it's so nebulous and people don't understand it, becoming a regulatory specialist would be really good because people will use you all the time. And there's other places to go, like data management is a great start. You get to really see it from the backside of being a CRA, from all the records coming in. And then, doing a site startup contract specialist, somebody that's familiar with that. So you can kind of work around sites in a way in the long form process, and then really have an understanding of how that starts to work, and then kind of move into the CRA space. And it'd look good on your career and your resume.
Excellent advice. Also, study coordinator, research assistant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the interview. Good luck with Hypercore, and maybe we'll see you again next year here at Bio.
That sounds good.
Right?
Yeah.
Take care, everybody. Thank you for watching and listening. Bye-bye.